Today is day one of our 30 by 30 virtual conference, a gathering for 30 by 30 champions, engineering leaders, and engineers. We'll be gathering together every Wednesday this month to discuss the progress that has been made towards greater equity, diversity, and inclusion in engineering, and the work that we all still need to do to break the cycle of exclusion. To begin day one of our conference, I would like to invite Elder Claudette Commanda to join me on the screen and to guide us in a traditional Algonquin prayer. Elder Commanda is from Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabe First Nation and has dedicated her career to promoting First Nations people, rights, history, and our culture in national and international settings. Elder Commanda was inspired by the work of her grandfather, William Commanda, who passed on his teachings and passion for language and cultural preservation to her. We have passed tobacco as we invite Elder Commanda here today, and I have a pouch of tobacco here. Elder Commanda, you have received the tobacco by mail, and I am offering it to you with gratitude for the knowledge and wisdom you will share with us today. After the event today, I will place the tobacco at the base of a tree here in my community in New Brunswick on the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik and Mi'kmaq peoples who are part of the Wabanaki Confederacy. We are deeply honored to hear your words and to have you open our conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you for the offering and the passing of tobacco. And thank you for the safeguarding of the tobacco and ensuring that the tobacco will be offered to the land in a good way. The tobacco holds our prayers, the prayers that will be said to open your 30 by 30 conference. The tobacco is the medicine that is offered to the Creator, and we thank the Creator for all that He has provided us with. So Chi-miigwech, miigwech. I have the tobacco here in my hand as well, and I'm holding it as prayer will be given. But I begin by saying Chi-miigwech, miigwech kakinak bijano ma nongum pijajiko ma Anishinaabe aki o mama wenenewag miigwech. Bienvenue tout le monde. Bienvenue ici à la territoire ancestral de la nation algonquin. Mon nom c'est Claudette Commanda. Je suis une femme algonquin de la Première Nation de Kitigan-Zibi. And I'm always honored and I'm always proud to welcome people into the homeland of the Algonquin people. And I am greeting you from this ancestral, unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. I acknowledge the territories of Indigenous peoples across Canada. I acknowledge each and every one of you as we gather here today for the opening of the 30 by 30 conference and honoring women in the engineering profession. It pleases my heart to see that Engineers Canada, you are inclusive of diversity and considerate of the tremendous success, intelligence, and strength that women have, and you are validating our women. And it's so important, and we appreciate that very much, the inclusion and diversity. It is said when we come together, we must come together with that one mind, one heart, one voice as we lift our prayers to Creator. It is said when we come together, we acknowledge the land, we acknowledge the ancestors, we acknowledge the people. And I acknowledge the first ancestors of this land that I am sitting on. My ancestors, Nijenwen Daganago Mamaweneniwak, the Algonquin ancestors. I acknowledge the ancestors of Indigenous peoples from coast to coast to coast. And I acknowledge each and every one of you who are participating today in this opening. I acknowledge your ancestors. Our ancestors are so important. We must never forget where we come from. We must listen to their heartbeats. We must listen to their voice for indeed they continue to be with us. And before I go into prayer, I say to each and every one of you, let us hold our hearts and our thoughts, and let's remember the 215 First Nations children who were found in that mass grave. They are our relatives. They are our communities. They are our people. And we know that the survivors and their families and communities, we are all impacted, and we must not forget the children. Let us hold them in our heart. Let us honor them in prayer, and let us raise our voice to Creator as we give thanks for bringing us here together, as we give thanks that we can have compassion in our heart, and we give thanks for the love that we feel. Chi miigwech kishimanado, miigwech kinahkego. Creator, thank you for everything that you have blessed us with. Miigwech jojoaki, we thank you, Mother Earth, for the water life, the plant life, the medicine life, the trees, the animals, all that is above and all that is below. And we thank you, Mother Earth, for always taking care of us. Chi miigwech kokomistepegizis, we thank you, our grandmother, the moon. Your light shines upon us every night, and we thank you for that guiding light. Chi miigwech mishomiskizis, we thank you, Grandfather Sun, for each and every morning. The love of your breath shines to give us that light that we need. We thank you. Miigwech nijenwendaganag, we thank you, ancestors. Miigwech. Creator, we thank you for the love. We thank you for kindness. We thank you for your blessings. Gishimanado miigwech. And Creator, Anabigus, Kokamisug, Eshishmishomsug, Daspinigan, Nibuksendam, Mashkawizwen Onji Kakina Nongom Shishwabang, Nibuksendam Gishimanado Minopomadzwin Onji Kakina Nongom, Nibuksendam Gishimanado, Widoko Wadoduin Onji Kakina Nongom, Shishwabang. And Creator, my prayer for all who are here is that you continue to bless them with strength, guide them, Creator, in the work that they do. And Creator, my prayer for the people who are gathered here that are attending this conference, Creator, for strength, wisdom, courage, and knowledge. And Creator, we come together. We lift our hearts, we lift our prayers, we lift our love, and we remember our children, the 215 children, and the many more who never made it home. And Creator, take our prayer and give it to those children and their families, for our love embraces them, and our love, Creator, will heal all that needs this love and support. Chimigwaj Kishimanado Onje Nongom, we thank you for today, Creator. Miigwaj Kishimanado, Nibuksendam Kakina Inde So Gishik. Thank you, Creator, for blessing us. And it is my prayer for all who are gathered here in the work that they do to honor the women in this engineering profession, the inclusiveness and diversity, Creator, that they embrace and continue to walk with the 7 grandfathers, and those 7 grandfathers that we refer to as love, wisdom, respect, courage, humility, honesty, and truth. And we thank you for their blessings. Chimigwaj Mishomsag. We thank you, the 7 grandfathers, for gifting us with strength. Chimigwaj. Thank you. Miigwaj, for each and every one of us coming here together and raising our voice and our hearts and our love, offering this prayer. So Chimigwaj, take good care, and I keep up the good work. Bless your hearts. And I look forward to hearing the knowledge that will be shared here today. Miigwaj, thank you.
Thank you so much, Elder Commanda, for sharing your insights with us today. And we would be delighted if you are able to stay for the session today and help to share your thoughts at at our second panel as well. By way of an introduction to our program today, we have video greetings provided by Pam Damoff, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Kwekwe, Udlakut, Tansy, hello, bonjour. Thank you for inviting me to the 30 by 30 conference. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation from my home in the riding of Oakville North Burlington. I'm so happy to see Engineers Canada taking action to increase diversity and make their profession more inclusive, particularly for women and Indigenous peoples. Our government strongly believes breaking down barriers to all career paths and opportunities is important for professionals in all fields and will strengthen communities and make workplaces more competitive. Last month, I met with Engineers Canada to discuss the work they are doing to advance women and Indigenous peoples within the industry. I was thrilled to hear about their specific outreach programs amongst Indigenous peoples through their Indigenous Advisory Council. I was also pleased to hear about the 30 by 30 program, which aims to have 30% of newly licensed engineers be women by 2030. Engineers Canada is doing good work to diversify their industry and create a more inclusive profession. On behalf of Mark Miller, Minister of Indigenous Services, thank you for developing programs that will increase access for Indigenous peoples, specifically Indigenous women, to engineering education. Our government recently released a report entitled Indigenous Peoples' Access to Post-Secondary Engineering Programs, which states that, and I quote, although the ethical imperative to promote Indigenous peoples' access to post-secondary engineering may be clear, what should also come to light is that diversity is key to achieving advances in engineering and applied science, end quote. The fact that a more inclusive, equitable, and diverse profession is a stronger profession. Closing the education gap and the labor market gap will generate financial security for individuals and also bring economic prosperity to communities. As a government, we wholeheartedly share your objectives to remove obstacles to education for Indigenous peoples, notably Indigenous women. Since 2015, we've made investments that have improved the learning experiences for over 100,000 Indigenous students per year and helped build almost 200 education-related infrastructure projects benefiting 240 First Nations communities. And in 2019, we implemented a new co-developed policy and funding approach to better support the needs of First Nations students on reserve. Budget 2021 proposes a historic new investment of over $18 billion over the next 5 years to improve quality of life and create new opportunities for people living in Indigenous communities. Working with Indigenous partners, these investments will make significant strides in closing gaps between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, support healthy, safe, and prosperous Indigenous communities, and advance meaningful reconciliation with First Nations, Inuit, and the Métis Nation. The budget also proposes to provide $150.6 million to support Indigenous students through the Post-Secondary Student Support Program and the Inuit and Métis Nation post-secondary education strategies. We know that young people need support to get through this crisis so they can complete their education and succeed in their chosen fields. We look forward to collaborating with Engineers Canada to increase diversity and inclusion in your profession to help you achieve your 30 by 30 goal. Miigwech, Kuyanamik, Marci, thank you, merci.
Our thanks to Ms. Dema for providing those greetings and speaking to the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion in engineering. Today, we will hear a keynote address from Charlene Theodore, the Ontario Bar Association's first Black president, who will give us insights on the EDI initiatives from another self-regulated profession. We will then move into a 15-minute break before reconvening for a panel discussion with perspectives from Indigenous women in engineering. But first, I'd like to provide a very brief overview of the 30 by 30 program, what it is, where it's at, and where it's heading. Engineers Canada, as the National Association of Engineering Regulators, has a long history of convening engineers on issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion in the profession. 30 by 30 was first conceived by APEGA, the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Alberta, in 2010, and was adopted by Engineers Canada as the national goal of raising the percentage of newly licensed engineers who are women to 30% by the year 2030. 30 by 30 works on a collective impact model that recognizes that the engineering regulators, post-secondary engineering faculties, and other stakeholders all need to be doing work to achieve greater equity, diversity, and inclusion in engineering. 30 by 30 has received national support across all provinces and territories. Engineers Canada collaborates with engineering regulators and other stakeholders to facilitate a national vision on this issue. When an organization endorses the 30 by 30 goal, they nominate a champion who actively engages in the 30 by 30 network. They also commit to investing in the creation and maintenance of programs and partnerships that lead to an improved experience for women in engineering, to sharing and applying best practices, to collecting metrics on the number of women in engineering in their jurisdiction, and to implementing policies that support the increased participation and retention of engineers who are women. Reporting on metrics, of course, gives us the ability to measure progress when it comes to achieving the 30 by 30 goal. Engineers Canada gathers all these metrics from the engineering regulators on an annual basis. And the graph on the screen shows 7 years of data on the gender breakdown of newly licensed engineers. You can see that the number goes up and down each year, and that we've seen a slight decrease in the number of newly licensed engineers in 2020, likely due in part to the pandemic. If we look more closely at just the number of women who are newly licensed each year, we see that progress has been slow. But with the most recent data from 2020, we see the proportion of women who are newly licensed staying strong. We will share more on this over the coming weeks. So those graphs provide a snapshot of the data that is used to measure progress against the 30 by 30 goal. I'd like to give you just a brief update on the recent work that Engineers Canada is currently undertaking as part of its 30 by 30 program. In 2020, as part of the implementation of our strategy on women in engineering, Engineers Canada hired an external expert consultant to evaluate and provide recommendations for communications around 30 by 30 work. This research was conducted in order to assess the opportunities for Engineers Canada to support women in pursuing a career in the field, to understand the career journey of women in engineering, to understand the moments in a woman's career that lead to not pursuing or even leaving the profession, and to identify the key supports that have and can encourage their career success. The following are key insights from the research conducted on women in engineering. We would like to acknowledge that many of these insights are well understood by many in our audience today. Our purpose is to reiterate these hard truths to raise awareness more broadly. What we heard is that women face constant systemic discrimination and harassment at every point in their career journey, and may even leave the profession because of it. This was a message that was repeated time and time again in the research. Throughout their careers, women highlighted being consistently discriminated against by employers and by their peers, with frequent harassment, lack of opportunity, and exclusion. These are things that were not experienced by their male counterparts. There's a quote on the slide from an engineer who was interviewed as part of the research. A woman in the early career stage of engineering says she was proud when she landed her first job and thought that she'd finally no longer have to prove that she was as good as her male colleagues. But she was in fact held to different standards than her male counterparts and had fewer advancement opportunities simply because she was a woman. This is, of course, one of many stories and experiences that we hear. What this research and other research has demonstrated is that when we look at the barriers faced by women, we understand that they may vary at different stages. In a girl's early education, there may be a lack of awareness of engineering as a pathway She may not be engaged in math and science by her teachers or counselors, and there may be a lack of female role models. In a young woman's post-secondary career, we see harassment by peers, lack of mentors, and isolation. Once women graduate and enter the early career stage, they continue to experience harassment by peers and managers. They are overlooked for promotion and are held to a different or higher standard than their male colleagues and experience career interruptions and penalties if they choose to have a family. Many of these barriers continue into mid and late career. We are certainly concerned about the retention of women in the profession as much as we are about recruiting them. With an understanding of the barriers and the numbers of women in engineering, we have worked to develop the following pyramid to refocus our 30 by 30 efforts. 30 by 30 is about changing the culture of engineering to make it welcoming and accepting for everyone. But making change is a process, and to be effective, Engineers Canada will now shift its process and its focus to building a strong foundation. This means getting engineering leaders across the profession to identify and acknowledge the problem. That's the base of the pyramid that you see on the slide and that everything else will build on. This focus is further supported in Engineers Canada's new strategic plan for 2022 to 2024, which was just approved last week at the annual meeting of members. The new strategic plan identifies 30 by 30 as a priority for the organization and instructs us to accelerate 30 by 30. This will mean acknowledging the issue across the entire profession, that culture change is necessary, the importance of engaging leaders and employers in the profession, and we will only achieve all this through collective impact and collaboration. I hope that this has given you a brief overview of our current work on 30 by 30, and indeed the conference itself is part of this work on 30 by 30. During today's session and during our sessions over the next 3 weeks, our objectives with the conference are to present best practices from engineering regulators and industry that address the barriers women face when entering and remaining in the profession. Raise awareness of how cultural and systemic barriers can be addressed by regulators and engineering leaders to affect change in engineering culture, and support increased acknowledgement from engineering leaders of the issue and foster a commitment to breaking the cycle of exclusion. But right now, I'd like to hand it over to Engineers Canada's Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Strategic Partnerships, Jeanette Southwood, to introduce today's keynote speaker, Charlene Theodore. Jeanette?
Thank you, Jean, and hello, everyone. I'm very happy to introduce our keynote speaker, Charlene Theodore, President of the Ontario Bar Association. One of Canada's lawyers' top 25 most influential lawyers of 2020, she is known for tackling some of the most challenging issues facing the bar and the justice system, as well as bringing about positive change throughout the profession for women and people of color. Charlene is a workplace lawyer with a background in public policy and government relations, and currently serves as in-house counsel to one of Ontario's largest teachers' associations. As a Black engineer, I was very interested to learn that Charlene is the Ontario Bar Association's first Black president. Also a member and former director of the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers, Charlene has embraced her role in improving equity, diversity, and inclusion in the justice sector and beyond. Her groundbreaking initiative, Not Another Decade, is focused on moving the dial on equality for Black and Indigenous people and people of color. She is also committed to working with lawyers and law firms to reimagine workplaces through her Work That Works initiative, building productive, profitable, healthy, and inclusive work environments for all lawyers. After Charlene's presentation, there will be time for a Q&A. Please put your questions in the chat. They will be anonymous, and Charlene will be able to see the chat and respond to your questions. Over to you, Charlene.
Thank you, Jeanette, and good afternoon to you all. Thank you for inviting me to take part in a timely conversation. I'm honored to be a guest here. The presentation by Ms. Boudreau was powerful, and really shone a light on the real barriers faced by women in your profession. I'm committed to using my time here today with you to offer solutions on the way forward. So let's get started. Like engineering, the law is a profession steeped in tradition that claims a proud history of serving the public interest and tackling some of society's most complex challenges. However, while at the center of so much progress and innovation from a societal perspective, we have also been a profession slow to change. You know, a lawyer friend of mine, we were talking last week, and he remarked, you know, the law is a sector where professionals who died a century ago could rise up from the crypt and go back to work with relative ease. This is not a compliment, and this is why we're doing the work that we do. Happily, that is a cultural inertia that we're conquering in our firms and our organizations. There's a growing recognition of the need to operate more inclusively so that we can better reflect and respond to our diverse clientele, and so that we will collectively form a more sustainable, accessible, and innovative profession. Accomplishing this means not only making our workplaces more talented, more attractive to top talent from all corners, but also making them more rewarding, empowering, and engaging so we develop and retain that talent. OBA members are prepared to put in the deliberate care and real work required to eradicate systemic barriers and ingrain bias and foster a truly inclusive and representative legal profession. Like you, we know that real inclusion would not become a reality within our academic circles and professional programs, our workplaces, or our profession without considered and concerted effort. We are so proud to know that organizations across all sectors like yours have followed our lead and are looking for ways to enact real change and to really transform statements of support into substantial action. OBA lawyers are problem solvers who hold dear principles of fairness and equity, so we have been quick to step up and seek new strategies to not only serve as models of inclusion in our own workplaces, but to set into motion plans that produce steady and lasting progress when it comes to EDI. As Jeanette mentioned, the OBA is fueling this momentum with two initiatives launched during my presidency, Not Another Decade and Work That Works. So Work That Works is driving conversation and developing tools, resources, and strategies that will equip organizational leaders to reinvent their workplaces into healthier, more productive, inclusive, and innovative spaces that really enable everyone to perform to their best potential and for everyone to partake in the leadership opportunities and the rewards. Work That Work is really a holistic approach that links complementary priorities like wellness and productivity, inclusion and enrichment, fulfillment and retention, access to justice and profitability, mentoring and service excellence. And it's really backed by an unyielding equity that brings balance to those objectives. Now, the OBA's Not Another Decade initiative is really a commitment that was meant to outlast me. It is a commitment to introducing one key performance indicator for legal workplaces to adopt each year for the next 10 years, while challenging leaders across other sectors like engineering to do the same. It's designed to move the dial toward equity meaningfully and measurably. It goes beyond asking why when it comes to EDI to asking how, and really actually goes further to provide the framework to support that transition. This year, the target we're focusing on is increasing the number of organizations and employers who have a truly feasible plan to improve equity, diversity, and inclusion in their workplaces. So this decade-long project dovetails with my Work That Works mandate, as constructive EDI efforts are integral to any workplace that works for its people and its clients. So let's continue on and find some solutions, find some answers to that question, how? How do you develop and deploy an effective EDI plan in a workplace that really works? Through my time as president and through my work leading up to it, we've identified some core components of creating an organizational plan for inclusion that will set not only women employees or female employees, but all employees up for success. So the first step is conducting an honest assessment of your current climate and your benchmarks. Some people call this an equity audit. It really involves surveying all your processes from recruitment to client intake. Look at who's leaving and who's staying in your organization. Examine whether you have women, particularly Black, Indigenous, and other women of color, in positions of leadership, not specifically related to your EDI mandate. and whether racialized employees, particularly women, are even on track for executive roles. What you really want to see is diversity across every level and every department of your organization, and observe career growth in trajectory and in tenure. Data collection is also integral to an effective plan. You need to hear from members of the communities you are seeking to engage and include in this process. For instance, understanding and acknowledging the experience of women in the workplace is critical to efforts to improve gender equity. Explain to employees how the information that they share will be used and how their privacy will be protected. I personally find it's always key to hire an outside practitioner to take on this element if that's what's needed to ensure trust. You'll have to also set goals that are ambitious but achievable and thoroughly connected with your EDI objectives. Now, data gathering will help you identify objectives that will help the outcome you desire and that are within your reach, with a top-down commitment and the resources at your disposal. A promising plan is also one that engages staff at all levels without jeopardizing a clear accountability structure. You do need buy-in from employees across the organization. You have to empower those at all levels, including middle management, to tailor the plan so that it works for the people that are trusted with the accountability and those whose work they oversee. It has to be universally adopted in order to avoid creating a silo that undermines EDI efforts and confidence in leadership ultimately. Making that happen requires some flexibility, so everyone feels that they can take ownership of the plan and their part in it. Keep in mind that when assigning the complex and specialized work of EDI planning that is objectively valued and compensated, it is especially important here that the effects of discrimination are not exacerbated by disproportionately assigning extra uncompensated EDI work to racialized and Indigenous lawyers, or to women who already find themselves burdened with a lot of invisible or administrative tasks. Now, the key here is you want their voices and their input to lend strength and substance to your planning and implementation as a management or leadership team, but the effort should not fall on their shoulders alone. And finally, every solid plan has accountability and transparency baked in, which means that you have to commit to reporting results on a predictable schedule to your stakeholders using clear performance to target indicators that might allow for explanation, allow for where you are in your journey, but do not allow for equivocation. When it comes to driving inclusion more broadly and advancing gender equity more specifically, we have culled a plethora of planning and implementation tactics from leaders in workplace change, from the Momentum campaign that the OBA launched in 2018, and now through my Work That Works podcast, which is available through Apple and Spotify. Each episode of the podcast brings practical tips and actionable insights to listeners who can incorporate those learnings as they lead their own workplace reinventioning. Now, recording this podcast, getting involved in this project, and being able to connect with leaders from all over who've really nailed this workplace culture change that we're all trying to achieve has been really eye-opening and really inspiring to me. And as Engineers Canada leads its 30 by 30 initiative, I thought it might interest you as leaders, allies, and agents of change in your own organizations to hear about some of the strategies that have worked so well for those engaged in similar efforts. Let's move on to the career journey of women. How do we understand the career journey of women in order to address them and meet their needs? Now, I'm a lawyer, and I'm going to be honest, the law has also had a long retention of women problem. In addition to the barriers and biases that prevent women from entering or remaining into the profession, there are also cultural and structural impediments that discourage or diminish the contributions of so many women lawyers who remain in settings that no longer motivate or reward them. The first step to addressing all of this is to try to understand the experience of women in the workplace. And a great and obvious place to start is asking your female employees, what do you need from leadership so you can do the best work of your career here? Now, organizational leaders should offer multiple types of feedback mechanisms with a sincere readiness to listen and act. Continue Continuing to solicit input, even when the conversation is difficult, is a way for leaders to generate trust and support from their women employees who may be experiencing profound challenges in the workplace, particularly during this pandemic, or when complicated by intersectionality like race or LGBTQ identity. Consider how you can validate and support employees through these experiences. When looking for gaps in inclusion, don't limit that examination to your formal systems like hiring, recruiting, and talent management. Look also at your informal systems for advancement and assignment. Things being said like, "You've never done this role before," is a claim often used even unconsciously against women, especially racialized women, to exclude them from opportunities, while their white male counterparts are frequently given the chance to try and fail forward, as it were, try out roles that might take them further in the organization. If you're not looking at these informal patterns, you're really ignoring a slew of system processes that create real barriers. It's useful for workplace leaders to dive into the data that you already have and look for what I call cliffs in the career progression of diverse female employees in order to identify barriers. Who's leaving your organization? Are they stalling, or are they dropping out when confronted with a role that's client facing, or when they need to lead a team? Is there some reason their managers, or perhaps they themselves, think they won't succeed? Technology can be so useful in identifying gaps. I spoke with a leading lawyer in the banking sector on the Work That Works podcast that shared with me that when women weren't applying for a tech-related role they needed filled, they ran the job posting through software that identified the language that was off-putting to women candidates. Once they addressed that issue, applications from qualified women came pouring in. I don't need to tell you that data, statistical and anecdotal, is where the tide begins to turn if you really heed it. Let's talk about those barriers. How do we combat the barriers that prompt women to leave the profession? Now, the work that the OBA has done in this area underscores that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to inequity in the workplace. It takes many tools, initiatives, and policies working in concert to really move the dial. But it's safe to say, among those things that don't work for many women in the legal workplace, and that frankly don't work for a lot of people, period, is an emphasis on long hours over quality output, on fixed schedules over flexibility, on fitting in versus standing out. Those conditions don't inspire anyone's best performance. And I'm seeing throughout this year, legal employers reinvent and reconstruct this rigid model that leaves many people out of the advancement equation. I've heard from member firms who are using innovative systems and technologies to equalize the allocation of work and design relationship building opportunities that take into account parental roles. I've spoken with small firm founders who are introducing 4-day work weeks or flex schedules that really inspire productivity without pressing an impossible choice between family and career responsibilities. All kinds of measures that place the focus on results for clients rather than hours logged or FaceTime at the office. Now, forward-thinking programs like these may ultimately benefit some groups more than others, but they should be designed for and promoted to everyone in the workplace. Consider when men take parental leave, it's kind of an allyship that normalizes career interruption. In return, isn't really a choice that new mothers also have to face. Leadership can really model best practices, whether it's in promoting equity and inclusion, taking allotted vacation time, prioritizing your work-life balance, or celebrating difference from the top down. If you're a workplace leader that's failing to invest in everyone in your company, you are failing your company, period. You don't have the option of saying, well, you're not good at having these difficult conversations about race or indigeneity or gender identity, or the ongoing work of fostering meaningful equity, diversity, and inclusion in your organization. If as a workplace leader, if you have the power to hire, fire, or otherwise affect the lived experience of those people that work for you, you have to get some of these key principles right. So for the women that are in our workplaces that have stayed, how do we support and encourage their career success? Well, women need role models in deciding on a career, and then they need real counsel, coaching, and support to develop their interests and aptitudes and navigate the workplace. There's often an opportunity gap that women experience from the very start of their careers. Unequal opportunities to build relationships, develop skills, and work on the kinds of files and projects that actually really advance careers. When you're at the leadership table and a project comes up, consider putting forward the name of a woman who you know would do a great job or who has great potential. The same is true for any assignment or opportunity that crosses your desk. It's important not to replicate the homogeneity out of habit. When looking to fill a role on your team, it's natural, I do it, to think of someone who resembles and shares the skill set of the incumbent who succeeded in the position. We have to break free of this mold. How can we do that? Let's imagine when their role comes up, let's imagine the skills and tools the role will require 5 years from now, 10 years from now, to picture what and who you really need for a future thinking organization. Don't just fill the seat occupied by someone leaving the organization with another one who looks just like them. If there are highly capable women in your organization, you need to help them develop their talents and leadership abilities. Now, some of you may have heard on this on the news, but the recently released Zero report found that many of the country's biggest companies have zero Black women or Indigenous women even in the pipeline to the leadership level. And that's not law, that's not engineering, that is Canadian business and services wholesale at large across this country. So this shows us there is work to do in creating for more opportunities for Black, Indigenous, and women of color to engage in meaningful work, gain recognition, develop their skills, and ascend to those executive roles. That's why it's so important that we look beyond building a pipeline to lifting up those who are already working for us and may have already been leading without the title. Remember that while doing this work and doing this change, being a good ally is an expectation. It's not an option. It's in everyone's job description. And if you're only looking at your own experience, you're not being a good colleague. Now, I'm here with Engineers Canada, a self-regulated association and profession just like the OBA. So how can your association, how can Engineers Canada and communities support women in the field? In driving systemic change, our professional associations are the engine where our power coalesces to move us farther down the road and faster than we could ever go alone. In keeping this momentum going and advancing equity, the role of the professional association is finding the best ways forward and showing others how to get there with meaningful targets, a measurable plan, and most importantly, effective tools. Now, for legal employers who find their good intentions in the workplace aren't translating into discernible gains in equity and engagement, the OBA is the go-to source for actionable ideas for organizational transformation across the legal community that leads to ongoing profession-wide progress. At the OBA, we've worked hard to provide the tools and education to support women's advancement and impact the profession. From the creation of the Women's Lawyers Forum to our parent and caregiver network, the work being done on equity in the profession has become a big part of the OBA community. And where there is community, there's opportunity. Opportunity for women to find their champions, to connect with colleagues, to explore new pathways and to add their voices to critical conversations and become a part of the changing face of a venerable, imperfect, challenging, but gratifying profession. I know members of Engineers Canada share with the OBA members a desire to make our professions and its workplaces more inclusive, engaging, and inviting, offering diverse and dedicated practitioners equal opportunity to contribute their talents, take on meaningful work, and reap the rewards. I have so enjoyed learning about the work you are spearheading in this area, and I look forward to finding more and more ways we might collaborate further. Thank you so much for having me. I am happy to take some questions now. Okay. Cassandra?
Looks like there's a couple questions in the Q&A.
Mhm.
And there's a lovely comment in the chat saying, this is the best talk on the topic I have ever heard. Thank you. So really, really nice.
I'll tell you, when Cassandra reached out to me, part of the brief, point one was, she said, Charlene, we want you to speak on these topics. And oh, by the way, it has to be the best talk on this topic that anyone's ever heard. So I'm glad I understood the assignment. I'm glad it resonated with you. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, the mic has been dropped. Really appreciate everything, Charlene, and definitely if people have questions, make sure that you enter it into the Q&A. So there's a question about the podcast.
Okay.
What's the name of the podcast? If you could describe it, how can people access it?
Sure. The podcast is Work That Works. And, when I knew I was going to become OBA president, like I said, I'm a workplace lawyer. I do a lot of work in this space, and my specialty is in using my legal skills and my knowledge in really workplace culture transformation to help people achieve their goals. I think my special skill set is seeing where the gaps are. You see the patterns of people who are genuinely interested in making change, doing the same thing over and over again in different ways, and it's not working. So I wanted to use the opportunity to show people, this is how you can get this done. This is why your diversity plan isn't working. This is why you're not getting more applicants from this community. And so what I did is I brought together some brilliant people who have really nailed specific aspects of what we're all trying to achieve in our workplaces, whether it's, something as, nerdy workplace lawyers like me, like 4-day work weeks or defined benefit pension plans, how we can better do benefit design, or whether it's hiring, recruitment, whether it's talking about pipeline programs to attract more diverse and female talent. So each interview focuses on an area. There are also some resources and tools that go along with each episode. The OBA has a page specifically for the podcast where you can access the episode. There's also transcripts there for people that are hearing impaired. You can read the podcast as well. And you can also, of course, feel like I'm the only one on Spotify, but Apple Podcasts is there. Rate us, send us comments. We love the feedback. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the link to the OBA site, specifically to the Work That Worked podcast, was put in the chat. But if not, I will make sure that Cassandra has the information and she can get it all out to you.
Amazing. Yes, I did enter the Spotify link into the chat, so people should be able to find it directly. And lots of people saying they could listen to you speak for hours, so they're happy that you have a podcast they can sign into. So I'm just kind of scanning through the Q&A, and we have questions firing in here. There's questions around leadership and how do you address and recommend conveying these issues with leadership and management when there is resistance, when the door isn't necessarily open right away, and especially when it is a male-dominated leadership team. If you have any suggestions for folks on the call.
Yeah, so what I will say is that in my experience, traditional homogenous male leadership, white or otherwise, has been way more receptive to this than people think. And so I also believe that you have to give people an opportunity to rise to the occasion or to not. And so I think we spend, in terms of where we kind of balance our energy, I think we spend a lot of time worrying about how we engage them versus actually doing it. And where people actually fall down is not it's not about talking about the issues or being open to talk about changing things. It's when the difficult conversation happens that's where the shutdown tends to be. And so my understanding is, just if you put this forward, if you say, look, we need to dedicate some resources to this, generally those things are well received. It's when the conversations start to get tricky and people maybe have to take accountability for what they need to do in their own learning. That's when things get tricky, and that's where I think it is often useful to hire a third-party service to help your companies with this. I think it's there's no, you can't make the conversations any less difficult. But the people that are attending here today aren't EDI strategists. They're not, change management strategists. They're skilled, bright business owners and engineers. And so I think that is where you seek an outside source. And also remembering that everyone is on, if we're on a spectrum, everyone is somewhere else, at a different place in terms of where they are in that spectrum of knowledge and understanding. Some people may have just heard about anti-Black racism, last year after the murder of George Floyd. Some people may have just picked up a book or a newspaper last week to learn about residential schools. But where you can unite people is, what is the shared vision for our organization? What is the shared vision for our company? Where do we want to go? And then work towards that.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, ideas around like best practices and examples. There's some questions about men as allies and what you see working and not working. And if you've seen any examples, whether it's in firms and practices or other businesses of men as allies really stepping up and taking on this kind of work.
Yeah, for that one, I love that question because I'd like to offer some practical tools that everyone can do today, right now. I mean, stay tuned for the rest of the conference. It's going to be awesome. But after that, it has been, if you look at the Catalyst and Lean in Canada reports, women of color, specifically Black women, we are over mentored and under sponsored, right? So what that means is, because of things like unconscious bias, people tend to want to teach us more and let me show you how to do this, when we are actually quite skilled. And what needs to be happening more in terms of, again, it's a balance. What we're not getting enough of is, who would be great for this project? Let's invite so-and-so to sit on our board. So whenever you're in a room and there is not another woman in the room, racialized or not, how many women are you putting up for opportunities, right? Make a commitment to yourself to say, look, I'm going to put women up for opportunities, whether it's speaking roles, pro bono, volunteer opportunities, projects. Set a goal for yourself. How many times in a month, in a year? Also take a look around your immediate circle, right? Are there any women in your immediate circle of younger engineers that you're mentoring? And if there are there any women of color? And you can change that today. I don't know in any profession, whether a young Black, Indigenous, or other woman of color wouldn't mind getting a call from someone powerful in their profession to say, let's have a virtual coffee. Let me learn about you, what you're interested in. I'll keep you in mind for opportunities. Those are two things you can do today. But overall, I think the conversation with allyship for men who do, I think, genuinely want to see women succeed in the profession, it's again about the how, is switch from switch from devoting all of your energy to saying, well, you can call me if you have a question about your career, I can give you advice, to actually on your own, taking the initiative and speaking these women's names in rooms where they don't have access to yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for all these amazing answers. There's a question around what does the association versus regulators and we're the association of the regulators, and if you have any thoughts in terms of what kind of pieces and initiatives you've seen work within the legal profession.
Yeah, so you're the association of the regulators, as you said, Cassandra. And so with law, it is a little bit different, but the principle is the same. So the OBA is the association. There is another organization that is the regulator. And I think what happened in the legal community, some of which played out in the national press, is that we weren't on the same page in terms of what needed to be done and what was kind of urgent on the agenda when it came to race. Of course, our regulator is always looking to improve equity, diversity, and inclusion in the profession. But as the association, we had a little bit more flexibility and more buy-in in terms of where we could go. And so at some point leading up to my role as presidency, my decision was I can support my regulator and continue to hold them accountable in a collaborative way. I do really believe in collaborative leadership, but you know, where I have this organization that I'm going to be the president of, and they're ready to go. They're ready to have bolder initiatives. Let's get going. And so I think that there is a way to find balance between, and this will play out nationally, because again, not everybody is going to be everyone's taking this journey, but not everyone's taking it at the same speed. And I think where there are sectors or stakeholders that aren't where you are yet, that I think that that's okay. And you can support them where they are, while also never forgetting your obligation to continue to lead collaboratively and lead from in front, not from behind.
And I love that you bring up collaboration, because there's no way that we can do this alone. And
Yeah.
by closing off our ears and being like, you know, this is your lane, this is our lane, and we can't talk together. We need to talk together. And we need to move this collectively and work together and have relationships. And that's really a big key to 30 by 30, is being able to learn from each other and to grow. And there's lots of questions in terms of sort of walking. So there's a question about leaders walking the talk, and how to, many call it a work-life balance. And if you have any thoughts in terms of the competitive nature of work and creating these environments that are supportive of different ways of being. And I know in your talk you said that there's like the fitting in versus standing out, and a rigid model that often keeps women from advancement. Yeah, if you wanted to share any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, so what I'll do first, I have lots to say on that. I have lots to say about a lot of things. But what I'll do first is just circle back to your comment about community and the reason why Engineers Canada is so important. And I hope that I demonstrated the role that the OBA has played in kind of, you know, leading the profession forward. The reason why community is so important, one of the many reasons why, is, you know, for most legal employers, and I would say engineers as well, how you do and how welcoming a place you are for women in your profession, given that there is specific challenges unique to in your profession, it is a business strategy, right? It is kind of trade secrets. And so when you're going out there and you're trying to recruit and you're trying to meet your own internal goals as businesses or stakeholders to attract more women, what we tended to do is, what law firm does is, well, okay, this is our EDI plan, right? This is our EDI plan. This is what we're going to do. And so we're going to make sure we get like the top, you know, the Black student that came out top in his class, or the Indigenous student that won that award for litigation. But what we have a profession I've realized since the events of last summer is that, of course, you can have and tailor your own programs for your specific workplaces to address the fact that there is real competition for female talent and for Indigenous talent, for Black talent, South Asian talent, etc. But as a profession, there is something bigger than us going on here. And so what we've really found to do is a way to connect on as a profession, even though we're competing for talent on the broader issues when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion, while still retaining some unique spin on inclusion to attract the best candidates to firms individually. And I think that as a regulator or association of regulators, that's having those conversations, you are really the most appropriate home for those conversations. In terms of the competitiveness and some of those competing priorities, Cassandra, and I hope I'm remembering the question correctly, you know, like law, we, as your profession and our profession, we operate businesses that have a bit of legacy to them, right? We're not generally not opening up, you know, small shops that are kind of fly by night or pop-ups. No matter how small the firm, people hope to kind of leave a legacy of their business that will succeed after they're gone. And what we need to recognize now is that we are at a place in society where we're really at the intersection of the traditional homogenous boardroom culture and a slew of new graduates, new entrants to your profession, or people that have already existed there but maybe never made it to the top, that are just demanding something different. right? And so when it comes to really sustainability, we talk about, corporate social responsibility, ESG. If you're not forward thinking about your business 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, you have to be able to find a way with, I think, third-party help to really optimize how some of these competing things can work together for a sustainable and profitable business. I think the best example is let's talk about mental health, right? We know that there is, as a country, we're coming out of a national mental health crisis, right? Overwork, not having that work-life balance, it does take a real toll on mental health. However, as an employer, we need our employees to be productive. We're client-based, we're client-focused, and we need them to actually put in real hours. I think where the balance comes in is saying, look, I want to get as much as I can out of this young talent, but I also want this young talent to one day be the future leader of our profession, or to not leave my organization or leave the profession because I'm taking all of their hours, right? And so reinforcing from the top down a culture of, work, but guard your and protect your mental health, providing benefits to employees, practical tip, if you're still paying for employees' gym memberships, maybe take that line item and switch it over to increase their mental health benefits. Things like that are ways that you can balance really having a productive employee, but let them know that it is okay to take breaks, because those are the employees that are going to stay with you and be the next leaders of your organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the comments in the chat also that, flexible work hours also support building inclusive environments for persons with disabilities.
Everybody.
For
Because
everyone.
they work for everyone. A rising tide raises all ships. It's funny, the first episode of the Work That Works podcast is my conversation with the lawyer, Quinn Ross. And this is really what he specializes in. He owns his law firm, but he specializes in helping companies move to this workplace model. And it is the most popular episode on the podcast. It might be because it's the first one, but I think it's because he's talking about how you get to practically a 4-day week. He was able to get to a 4-day work week, to real remote work before the pandemic hit, and to a defined benefit pension plan. As a workplace lawyer, I'm a bit of a geek about pension plans, and they really are a powerful tool in terms of workplace culture and workplace satisfaction. We can talk about that anytime. But yeah, there are ways to do it. And the reason I think that Work That Works has been accepted so widely, the reason why I'm here today is because this is challenging. I'm not trying to understate how challenging and complicated it is, but there are solutions. We're not all collectively in the dark trying to feel our way around. There are people that know what to do and can help you get about the business of doing it.
Mm-hmm. And I think from seeing the chat and the comments is people are struggling with how to convert these messages and lessons that you're talking about into usable communications with their leaders. How do they move things forwards in their own organizations? And I know that, like, listening to the podcast, and probably there's some other links and things like that.
Yeah.
And, people wondering what's the best way to connect with you and the work that you're doing in the future.
I am president until August 31st. President of the Work for OB until August 31st. But I will be, so of course we are happy to continue to work with the engineers. I mentioned briefly in my keynote that we started our Momentum Summit that we had in 2018 when Lynn Vickers, our 9th female president, was at the helm. And we sat down and we had a conversation with female engineers, accountants, and females in finance to talk about our shared collective issues in terms of moving this forward. So it's work that we continue to do. And so in terms of working with the OBA as an organization, Cassandra will definitely have the information for doing that. In terms of working with me personally and the work that I do, I'm happy to take all of those calls after August the 31st.
Yeah, understandable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it looks
Absolutely.
like we still have a couple more minutes for questions. So
Yeah, I try to be mindful of the time because I
Yeah.
know that when I do speak, there are always more questions than the organizers expect. That might say something about the quality of my speech, but hopefully it doesn't. And so I know I cut it off a little early because I saw the questions just come pouring in. So I'm here for as long as you would like me to be.
Okay, well, let's do a couple more questions.
Okay.
There's a question, I know we've talked about culture and environment, but kind of the idea around the fail forward mentality.
Yes.
That engineering really is a results focused oriented culture.
Mhm.
So it's really difficult taking those, allowing for that risk,
Mhm.
to be comfortable with failure, and how do we address that, as it's so embedded in how people work and how engineering is also taught. So just curious if you had any thoughts you wanted to share on that.
So yeah, what I would say is I just want to just reframe that or correctly frame that a little bit. It's not about being comfortable, just kind of throwing risk out the window, right?
Mhm.
And putting a junior fresh out of school on a major project and saying, well, you're Black or Indigenous, so my work here is done, good luck. What it is about is really taking, like I said, in terms of like when you're planning your EDI strategy, taking an honest look at yourself and talk about what your risk assessment looks like when you're giving opportunities to new men versus, or to men in the profession versus what it looks like when you're giving opportunities to women versus women of color. And the studies have shown time and time again, you know, of course we don't like risk, but we really, really don't like risk. women are in the lead,
Mhm.
right? They're questioned more. We're all of a sudden a lot more nervous when we hand leadership roles and projects over to women, and we're questioned more. You know, our if we get the project at all. I would encourage you to read the Zero Report, read the Catalyst Report for Women, read the Lean In Canada report or the Lean In report. I also had a guest on my podcast, Minda Hartz. She's doing amazing, amazing work throughout the States. She wrote a book called The Memo. And I like to call it, it's the lean in for women of color. And it's what women need to do to get a seat at the table, what women of color need to do to get a seat at the table in corporate America, corporate Canada. And what I love about the memo is it's not just something that's speaking specifically to women of color and addressing some of the women focused programs and studies that have kind of left out the unique experience of women of color, is that she's got a tremendous audience of white men, white women, people who are not part of the community, but who want to understand how they can better support their employees of color. We also started an OBA book club where our last guest was Minda. And so I will hopefully be able to, I will connect Cassandra with that recording as well, where we really took a deep dive into the book and talked about that. So again, to sum up, it's not about abandoning risk. It's about looking at who we give the benefit of the doubt to, who we trust in leadership positions. And unless your profession is the exception to every rule that I've seen across this country in my work, I think you'll find there's some differential there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I know there's lots of people who want to do some reading after this. I'm sure they're motivated to check out the report.
I will provide you, Cassandra, with a resource list. You know, I spent most of my pandemic watching Netflix. I work so hard and I read so much. And so what I don't have to, I don't, but I'm glad to see that you guys have the energy that I had back in March of last year, and you all want to read and listen and learn. So I will make sure, Cassandra, that you have a resource list of some of the things I talked about today, and you can pick and choose what you want to engage in and to get started in doing some of the learning.
Perfect. Yes, I think that you've probably lit a fire for a lot of people today.
I'm glad.
Maybe we'll do one more question and then we'll take a break because we have more programming after this. But there's a question around unconscious bias and how it gets into policies and practices and institutions. And if you have any thoughts on how to correct the bias and how you see it along the pathway, right? Because there's really what you're talking about is it's work. There has to be that's done, right? And
Yeah.
where in that work does unconscious bias and addressing that come in?
So, okay, now we're getting to the advanced class. So just stay with me. So unconscious bias is it's a term we know about, we talk about, we can very easily connect kind of how our decisions are made based on biases that we're not kind of always actively thinking about. But, and again, there's an episode of the podcast on this where I speak with another real force of nature, Lily Zhang. And we talk about the dangers of unconscious bias and how it can actually kind of work against you, just that training. What I will say is people tend to rely, unconscious bias is real, it's a thing. People tend to rely on unconscious bias training to the exclusion of other complementary training, action, and solution. You cannot unconscious bias train your way out of a bad workplace culture when it comes to women, when it comes to gender, when it comes to race, right? So it is a tool like all other tools, and you need to really work with the professional strategist to understand when and how to use the tool. It's an indirect answer to your question, but I think it's important for people to know. What I will say is that, unconscious bias, I talked in the keynote about, you should talk to your employees, but you can't just call everyone into your office. You have to have different methods of communication to build trust and make sure people are comfortable with. Unconscious bias training and identifying unconscious bias is something that people should do, but they should do it after they've kind of sat down, done the work, know their whole framework, how they're going to address these issues, and where they're going to put the unconscious bias training in. Is that clear as mud, Cassandra?
Yes, amazing. I think you ended us on a bang. And I think what we want to do is, well, I'm going to thank you, and I'm going to pass the microphone over to Jeanette to lead us through the next piece. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much, Cassandra, and thank you so much, Charlene. It was a pleasure to hear from you, and to echo some of those comments. We could listen to you forever, and we look forward to hearing more from you and seeing more of what is accomplished with the OBA, not only this year, but echoing through future years. So at this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to Jean, and she's going to continue on with our program. But again, Charlene, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, and enjoy the rest of your program.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. And I echo the thanks to Charlene as well for her inspiration, her enthusiasm, her passion. It was all good. So right now we're going to take a 15-minute break. So take this opportunity to stretch, refill your tea, coffee, or water, grab a snack. But instead of logging out, please do not log out. Please stay logged in, and we will join us back again at 2 p.m. Eastern for our second session, which is Perspectives, Indigenous Women in Engineering. See you very soon.
We're just about done our break. So I will start welcoming everybody back. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Cassandra Polyzoo, Engineers Canada's Manager of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I'm a settler and a first-generation Canadian, and I would like to acknowledge that I am a visitor on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people today. Before we begin our next session, where we'll be joined by a fantastic group of Indigenous women engineers, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the historic and ongoing trauma of residential schools, including last week's tragic discovery of 215 children's remains on the grounds of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School on Tecumseh First Nations land. We mourn with Indigenous peoples today, their families and communities over the tragic loss. This discovery is sadly not an isolated incident, and this is just one heartbreaking example of the violence and pain inflicted by the residential school system on Indigenous peoples. Discovering the truth of what happened at residential schools is an important part of reconciliation, with public commemoration of the history of residential schools being one of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. We recognize that the painful consequences of the residential school system continue to be felt today, and many have likely spent the last few days and weeks, if not longer, experiencing the grief and reliving the painful memories. If you need support, and I believe we have a slide with phone numbers on it as well. There are lots of help and support lines out there. The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for former residential school students and others, and the Canada Suicide Prevention Service is also a line that's available 24/7. And the Indian Residential School Survivor Society is also offering counseling, health support, and cultural support for residential school survivors and their families. For non-Indigenous people, it is imperative that we educate ourselves on the national and local history of colonialism and residential schools, that we take a moment and we do this work our whole hearts. And there are countless courses and books to start learning or to deepen your existing knowledge. And we'll provide some links in the chat. There's lots of great resources, so feel free to also add them, things that you've experienced as well or you've found as well. So we can, I think we have we have some comments in the chat, so we'll kind of continue to watch those. So for our final session today, we're really delighted and thank you for sticking with us today. We're going to have a panel discussion about the perspectives of Indigenous women in engineering, acknowledging the fantastic contributions that they have had. I have the pleasure of welcoming our moderator to the discussion today. Denise Poitier has a background in chemical engineering and more than 25 years of industry experience. She is currently the Vice President of Practice Services and was the first ever Vice President of Indigenous Relations at Stantec. Since joining Stantec, she has helped develop, build, and now support Stantec's Diversity and Inclusion Council. She is a firm believer that diversity and representative employee base led by a diverse and representative leadership team enhances and strengthens the culture of equity, innovation, quality, health, and safety within an organization. I've had the great pleasure of working with Denise. She was the past chair of Engineers Canada's Indigenous Advisory Committee, and just such a joy and very, very happy to have her here with us today. I'll turn the floor over to Denise to introduce the panelists and kick off the discussion. We will have a Q&A after the discussion, so feel free to use the Q&A that you find at the bottom of your screen, and also feel free to use the chat throughout. So over to you, Denise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn. Cassandra, Gouet, bonjour, hello everyone. I am joining you from Jabultuk, from Halifax, Nova Scotia, the unceded ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. And in echoing Cassandra's opening remarks, thinking of the residential school survivors of the Shubenacadie Residential School here in Nova Scotia. And so thank you, and thank you to our elder for being here with us today. It's very much appreciated. Thank you to Engineers Canada, Sandra and Jeanette, for organizing these platforms, these safe places where we can have these very important discussions. So thank you. And with that, it is truly an honor and a privilege to be a moderator for the Indigenous Women's Panel. I have the great pleasure of introducing our three panelists, and I will start with Esther Escott Pienge. Esther is currently a senior transportation engineer with the City of Calgary's Transportation Planning Department. Esther grew up in Brandon, Manitoba, and she graduated with a civil engineering degree from the University of Manitoba in 2001. Esther began her engineering career in Regina, Saskatchewan as a project engineer with Sask Energy. She then moved to Calgary, Alberta, working with the City of Calgary's Water Resources Department in the area of stormwater management. Esther then transferred to the City of Calgary's Transportation Department, where she has been involved in road design, transportation impact assessments, parking studies for nearly 10 years now. Esther is currently the president of the City of Calgary's Society of Professional Engineers, and in her spare time, Doesn't sound like you have a lot of it, but in her spare time, Esther likes going to the gym and taking her 2 children to gymnastics and trampoline. Esther is Anishinaabe and a member of the Lac Seul First Nation. Welcome, Esther. It's a pleasure to have you here. And next, Catherine Levesque is EIT and is a graduate of that's engineering training, is a graduate of the University of Manitoba Civil Engineering Program, as well as the Engineering Access Program, ENGAP. She is a Métis woman who resides near Winnipeg, Manitoba. Catherine grew up with a love of math and sciences, which eventually led her to a career in engineering. She also holds a bachelor's degree in recreation management and community development from the University of Manitoba. Currently, Catherine works as an EIT in the structural group at Dillon Consulting on bridge and culvert projects in Manitoba and in Northwest Ontario. And as well, she's a counselor for Engineers Geoscientists Manitoba Council. Welcome, Catherine. And lastly, our third panelist, Monica Rumbold. She is an Inuk tradeswoman from the Nunatavut. I said that improperly, you'll have to correct me, Monica. She's the Nunatavut Council, located on the southern shore of Labrador. She has been directly involved with the mining industry for 8 years and continues to do work on community and company relations while trying to advance educational and employment opportunities to Indigenous youth within that region. She now works as a youth engagement officer for the Ulnuweg Community Foundation, and she's currently creating those very important partnerships between Indigenous organizations and companies. Welcome, Monica. Welcome, everyone. So we have some questions prepared for each of the panelists. And then, of course, at the end, we will have the opportunity for anyone who's listening in to ask any additional questions of our panelists. So Catherine, we'll start with you. And if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit more about yourself, what you feel has contributed to your success and defined the path that you took. And also, if there are any unique life experiences that brought you to the place that you are now within your career progression. So I'll open that up to you.
Great, thank you, Denise. I took a few notes to prepare, so if it sounds like I'm reading, I'm sorry. I got some feedback from the director of ENGAP, and he said, "Don't worry, you don't have a problem talking." So that's why I took notes, so I don't ramble on too much. So my family has spent multiple generations in southern Manitoba in French communities there. My first language is French. I went to school in French my whole life, elementary school and high school. And then I went to the University of Manitoba. So that was a big transition for me because that was all in English. So I had all my formative years in French, the sciences, all the math. So that's a lot of terminology and things that was kind of why I liked math, because it's a universal language. My siblings and I are first generation university students. I had initially started in the sciences in university, my first 2 years. In high school, I had a poor grade 11 physics experience, so I never took grade 12 physics. And because of that, it really hindered the different paths that I could take within the science world, because I didn't have that extra science to really round me out. Because of that, after 2 years, I switched to recreation management and community development, and that's where I completed my first bachelor's degree. I was always really passionate about sport, wellness, and how it can impact a community and really help a community thrive in a healthy way. After working for a year, though, I kind of needed a bigger challenge and a way to help on a bigger scale is sort of what I felt. And I applied to the engineering faculty through the Engineering Access Program, ENGAP. So part of your question is what contributed to my success, and one of the things that is always front of mind is that I had a really supportive family and a partner, and so it was really, that made a big difference for me, and that there was no questions as to why am I going back to school again. It was, you can do this and you're meant to do this. That made a big difference for me. Within NGAP, they helped me have the tools I needed to succeed within the faculty and the civil engineering program. They have an upgrading program that helps everyone, whether you have your grade 12 physics, math, any of that kind of stuff. They help you get to a level playing field, and they help you really be prepared no matter where you come from for the university level courses. And that's a big tool. And so that helped me have that grade 12 physics and it took away that barrier for me. What else? I think the thing, when I reflect back on NGAP, the thing that really made the biggest difference for me is that they provided a sense of community and a sense of belonging within the engineering faculty. So sometimes you can feel really alone if you feel different, if you feel, you know, you don't come from a background where your family's gone to university, or you come from a family of any type of professionals. It's kind of a really new experience, and it gave you a place to physically be between your classes, but also you had peers that had a similar experience or have a similar background to you, and that made it way easier because there was no pretending that it was easy. Everyone was very honest and frank with their struggles going through engineering school. So having that support from not only an incredible staff, but also from your peers went a long way. So fast forward to today, I'm in EIT. I'm super close to getting my professional designation. I'm looking forward to that. And like you mentioned, I work at Dillon Consulting in the engineering, the structural engineering group in Winnipeg.
Wonderful, an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that, Catherine. I can certainly appreciate the going from all your schooling to be in French to all of a sudden switching over to English. It does add that additional element of challenge. So thank you for sharing that. Monica, we're hoping that you'll be able to share your story as well and your lived experience with everyone.
I'm so happy to be here today. As you'll notice, I am the only one on the panel that is not an engineer. I considered myself a failed engineer, and I'll get into that now in a minute. Actually, so I'll tell you, I do wear a lot of hats in my regular life. I am the Youth Engagement Officer with the Unaway Community Foundation. I am also an advisor for the MMIGW. I'm a registered fine artist. I do a lot of work and support on a community level. I teach an Inuit drum dancing class here. I have my own tourism business that I operate in the summer. I'm a very busy person, and I love it that way. So I guess to really answer your question, like most Indigenous youth here in the region, I grew up in a very poor section. Usually like fishing families, things like that. Not really having the money to go to school, but I was very interested in engineering from a young age. Of course, I had to take a student loan, go to school. And unlike most regions, we don't have a lot of funding opportunities available here to Inuk students. So some of us do rely on government support. I ended up going to school. I could not return because I never had the supports there. Like I said, the monetary supports, the social supports. So I ended up coming out and getting a technologist degree, ended up working with an engineering firm. And unfortunately, like it was addressed earlier on from another speaker, there were ups and downs. So as a technologist, I was downgraded to a secretary and the first one to be laid off. So in 2018, I was unemployed, in student debt, and very pregnant, which all changed when I seen that the system had been very broken, that it was a huge struggle for students such as myself and the ones coming through now to gain access to education and to gain access to unbiased employment. So that's when I started working with companies and became, I guess, a heavyweight champion in making sure that they adhere to the policies and the regulations, and most importantly, the contracts that they sign with Indigenous governments in the region. So part of my job is to make sure that I have good engagement with the youth in my community, but my true passion is to make sure that they can access their potential and the opportunity that the world has to offer them.
Amazing, amazing, Monica. So that sense of community that Catherine mentioned that she had within her program would have been so beneficial to you. But a remarkable, story for you. So congratulations on everything you've achieved.
Thank you. Well, I never had it, but I'm here to make sure that that the Kulus coming up will have it. So,
Absolutely. Wonderful trailblazer. And Esther, thank you for joining us. And would you like to share with us your experiences and what brought you to engineering?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Esther Escott. I'm currently a senior transportation engineer with the City of Calgary Transportation Planning Department. I'm originally from Lac Seul First Nation in Ontario, Anishinaabe. I didn't actually grow up and live on the reserve. My family, we moved to Brandon, Manitoba, and I spent my entire childhood in Brandon, Manitoba. So I attended kindergarten to grade 12 in the Brandon School Division. In high school, my high school had a full-time career counselor on staff. I think it was called a guidance counselor back then. And so you had to meet with this career counselor as part of grade 10, 11, 12 regularly, and you had to plan a career path. So when I met with the career counselor, even in grade 10, she asked me, what are you interested in? Showed me the book of careers, the pamphlets, the professional material from the associations. And I was really interested in the sciences. I was really interested in kind of like optometry, chiropractor, veterinarian, that kind of stuff. And then she said to me, well, have you ever thought about engineering? And I didn't know anything about engineering at all, nothing. And I kind of was like, no. And then she said, you know what, engineering, they're looking for women right now. And if you get into engineering, she said, I guarantee you, you'll get a job and you'll always have a job and you'll make a lot of money. And when she said that to me, I just grasped onto that. I like that. So it was really just her saying that got me into this profession. She hooked me up with, I had to do a job shadowing. So there were only 2 professional engineers in Brandon at that time. There was the city engineer of Brandon, his name was Ted Snur, and then there was an engineer that designed farm buildings. So I job shadowed the city engineer for the whole day. The city engineer took me around City Hall, showed me around. I met the mayor, I met the councilors, showed me what he did. And it was just like, I was just hooked. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to be the city engineer. And like, anytime anybody asked me like, oh, what do you want to do after high school? I would just say, I'm going to be the city engineer. So I went to University of Manitoba. So went from being top of my class in high school in Brandon, always thought of as being smartest kid in the class. I went to University of Manitoba, first year, calculus 101 or whatever, bottom of my class, failing, had no, in a lecture theater of 200 strangers, you can't ask the questions to the professor doing a lecture. It was just totally, didn't know anyone, totally lost. I ended up basically F, failing grades. I was in a lot of trouble. And it was another coincidence that happened to me. Another student asked me if I was Native. She said, are you Native? And I was like, yeah. And she said, we have a program here at the University of Manitoba called NGAP. And you can come with me. And she showed me the NGAP program, introduced me to the staff and the director, and NGAP just signed me up right there for this engineering access program. And what it is, as Katrine already explained, it's basically just provides support to Indigenous students, and supports having a computer lab. Back then, this is a long time ago. We had a computer lab back in those days. So we had our own lab. You had a lot of encouragement, and just that like atmosphere of having like people that encouraged you and supported you and friends, and like having a place to go and having people to study with, and having some older students to help you with some of the tests and like give you their old exams and things like that. So I really credit this NGAP program for my graduation from university. I graduated in 2001 with a civil engineering degree. I got my first engineering job immediately after Sask in Saskatchewan in Regina, Sask Energy. Sask Energy had an EIT program, but they had one position specifically for Indigenous EIT. So I was offered the Indigenous EIT role and went through Sask Energy's training program. At the end of that EIT program, which was amazing, I learned so much at Sask Energy. The people were great, like the staff was unbelievably amazing. I can't even explain how, like, they were so welcoming to me. Like, they used to invite me to their house for barbecues. We'd go to like Moose Jaw, to the air show all together. Like, it was just an amazing environment. So then the EIT program, it ended, and you were expected to find a job. So I ended up getting a job in Calgary, City of Calgary Water Resources Department. And then I worked there for 8 years, mainly in stormwater. And then I transferred to the Transportation Department, where I've been for 10 years. And I just recently, last year, was promoted to Senior Transportation Engineer in the Transportation Planning Department.
Excellent. Congratulations on your promotion. So again, a common theme there around that support and sense of community and place that's been a part of your success. And so we'll go on to our next question. Thank you all for sharing those experiences. And we were going to explore, you know, if there was one piece of advice that you would give to other Indigenous people in engineering, but also considering, you know, STEM in general, the broader subject of STEM, what advice you would have there. So Monica, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
I don't mind at all. I think this is just kind of, it's a very broad piece of advice, but very, very crucial. Like I said, when I speak to this, it's because I speak from experience. Maybe if I had this going through the program, I might have actually become an engineer. But research your resources before you commit, before you, I mean, for many of us, we live very remote. Before you pack up and leave, make sure whatever institution is there can offer exactly what you need, whether that is mentorship, right? Financial support, that is peer support, and most importantly, cultural support. I find, especially now that we talk about the STEM program in general, when we move on to these professions, that is the first thing that we become disconnected from, is our culture, our sense of being. And that's who allows us to be who we are. I feel, especially coming from a mining perspective, if we had more Indigenous voices speaking to the chain of command, operations would run differently. We would look more at sustainability. We would be more open-minded in planning for the future. So I really like to stress that not everybody is with the times, unfortunately, but we're moving in the right direction. Still, before you commit to this huge life change, and that's what it is, for a student that is 18, 19 years old to move away from something they're so familiar and comfortable with, they need the proper resources and support from these institutions, these companies, to really thrive in their element. So that would be something, I think, top of the list for sure.
Very well said, Monica. And we got 100% in agreement with you there. Employers need to create that space where employees can bring their full, true, authentic self to the workplace, and will be far more richer and better off for it. So thank you for sharing that. Katrin, would you like to share some thoughts on that?
Sorry, I didn't want to be told you're on mute. I get told once a day at least. So you spoke about being authentic, Denise, and that was sort of part of like how I formulated my answer, in a sense, is to, and I'll tie it back in, but it's finding that support network of people that you can lean on, that you can reach out to when you are struggling with whatever aspect it is, as you know, a new EIT, as a student, and not being hung up over finding that one person that's a carbon copy of you. Find multiple people that you can go to for different types of conversations. Randy Herman, who's the director of NGAP, I'm sure was hoping to be finally rid of me when I was done, but I've maintained that connection, and he's someone I really rely on for advice, because I can be authentically myself with him, and I can be frank about the struggles that I'm having. And there's also like, I think I saw Karen Dow was also one of the participants, and she was one of my professors in university, and I really connected with her, and I tried to maintain that relationship afterwards. It's also important to put in the work to meet new people, because you never know how you're going to meet and make those connections with people, because sometimes, depending what area you work in, it may be hard to find it within your company, depending where you work. Or sometimes it's hard to find it within your group that you're in, and you may be able to connect with someone. I'm in structural, I may connect with someone that's in water resources and really have kindred spirits in a sense. You never know where those connections are going to be. I've also done a lot of mentorship programs, like as someone being mentored, and some of those relationships have been lasting, and accepting that sometimes those relationships are not meant to go on forever, right? Sometimes it's helpful in that moment, and then you move on and life goes on, right? But sometimes it's worth putting in the work to maintain some of those relationships that are really meaningful. The other thing I was going to say is be patient, because building that network takes time and it takes effort. And we're all so busy that it's really hard sometimes to maintain those professional relationships. And the last thing I was going to say is pay it forward. A lot of really great people have that's truly the number one thing that has helped me as I transitioned from university. Having those people of support that I can meet for coffee. It may not be often, it may just be that one pep talk that I really need, that no, you're meant to be here and you're going to do great things and it's going to get better, you know? So having those conversations, having that pep talk, it really helps. And recognizing that when you're then in a position to help someone else along the way, to take the time to do that, just paying it forward, it goes such a long way.
Absolutely, thank you. I love the pay it forward, and also when we're faced with difficulties, you know, like COVID has added a level of complexity and difficulty and challenges to ourselves, and sometimes just having that touch point where somebody can lift you up, can give you that hope to sort of carry on is so important. So having that network, thank you. Nestor, we'd love to hear what your thoughts are around your advice for other Indigenous people.
Sure, yeah, something I've been learning myself the past year or two is confidence. I've really struggled with confidence throughout my career, and I'm only recently building my confidence in myself. I've always doubted myself. I've always been, it's been an issue for me. So I would just encourage other Indigenous engineers to really build up confidence and be really confident that, you know, confident in your decisions, in your decision making, in how you came to that decision, your thought process. This is like really important in engineering, to be able to go through a thought process and decision making and be able to defend how you came to that decision. And if you can defend how you got there and how your thought process is, then you're never wrong. it's so that really helped to build up my confidence. And then lately I've been working on really being careful with accuracy in what I say, being very scientific and factual, and engineering has really helped me. And I think, yeah, and also Katrina already talked about it, but the mentoring is really, really important to be able to get into a work group or a work environment where you have mentoring, like really good mentors, that because once you graduate from formal education, you're kind of left to learn your profession from mentors and the other engineers that are kind of showing you, teaching you what they know. So you have to get with some really good mentors.
Absolutely.
I'll just add to the mentorship real quick. Like I was thinking too, it's so important whether you're Indigenous or not, if you're in a position of power, to try and make time for those mentorship relationships, and to try and mentor people that don't look like you. Make an effort to actively seek to like elevate someone that does not look like you, because just as humans, I think we tend to gravitate towards people that are like us. That's where we feel safe. And I think try to make a point of identifying people that are different and elevating them.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Esther and Catherine. And earlier on, Esther mentioned, her guidance counselor mentioned engineering, and she was like, what is engineering? And it is one of those professions that, unless you have a close person that's in engineering, it is difficult to understand. So we'd love to hear from you on effective ways that you have seen or been part of to get students interested or thinking about engineering and STEM careers. So we'll start with you, Katrin, if you don't mind.
Okay. No, that's perfectly fine. I actually was going to resonate that it's like you can only become what you know, and like kids really have to be exposed to what an engineer is, because I didn't know. I always, when I was younger, wanted to be an architect, and it wasn't until like I had completed a full degree and I was going back to school and figuring out, am I going into architecture or engineering, that I really understood what I thought an architect was is really what engineering was and what I wanted to be. So creating situations and programs where kids are exposed to not only STEM, but like careers in STEM and understanding what those things are, it goes a long way. So I'm gonna like highlight someone, and I don't think she's a participant, but I know it's going to make it through the grapevine that I talked about her, but she deserves to be talked about, is Nusrat Masood. She's the director of Women in Science and Engineering, WISE. I worked for them for one summer. It was probably, I would call it a life-changing summer, where we did outreach to Indigenous communities across Manitoba, also in the inner city and schools there, promoting STEM, doing workshops, doing summer camps, making science cool and exciting. And we were all science or engineering students that were executing these programs. So they're also meeting people that are working towards having a career, so then they kind of could make that connection. So Nusrat has a TEDx talk that she did a number of years ago, and at the same time that I had started working there for the summer, I came across this TEDx talk, and it was like really my like aha moment of like, I really understood that concept of like, you can only become what you know. I encourage everyone to look it up because it's really well said. So she also is the director of, at the same time as WISE, is also the director of IEEQ, the Internationally Educated Engineers Qualification Program at the University of Manitoba. So she's a rock star, and like the work that her and her team does like is incredible. So all of that to say that it's really important that to make STEM and careers in STEM really fun and engaging, and having that exposure at a young age so that they can want to be those things, because we typically go into lines of work that like our parents have done or a family member has done, and that just keeps perpetuating a cycle of an entire profession looking the same, right? So until we break that, it'll keep going that way.
Very well said. Looking forward to that TED Talk. Hopefully somebody will find it, maybe put it in the chat.
I can put it in the chat right away here.
That would be great.
I have it on
And-
standby.
And Esther, would like to hear from you, especially where you went into a career that you didn't know. Thankfully you had a guidance counselor who thought it was a good fit for you. And what are your thoughts about getting students interested in engineering and STEM?
I guess from the thinking about Indigenous youth, when I was in the NGAP program at University of Manitoba, part of what that program did was we used to go to the high schools in northern Manitoba to their career fair events. We'd all get in a van, all the university students, we'd get in this van, a 12-seater van, and drive to the PA, or we'd drive to these remote communities and go to the high schools, and we had a booth, and it was the booth that unfolds, and we'd set up at their career fairs, and we just talked to the Indigenous students about engineering, and just talk to them about what it was, and we'd even tell them, we have a program at University of Manitoba that will support you and help you transition to living in Winnipeg, and there's we have all this help, and we'd give them all the information about NGAP when we went on this little tour. And it might have been it was NGAP and the University of Manitoba had I think back then it was called Aboriginal Student Office. So it was kind of those two, this is a long time ago, two programs working together to go up to the remote communities and to bring the booths to the science or the career fairs.
Right. So again, sort of along the lines of you can't be what you can't see, or you gravitate towards the things that you know. So having Indigenous students in front of younger students and having those conversations and engaging them, and then telling them about all the supports that are available so they don't feel like they'll just get, sort of be left alone. That's an amazing thing. And do you feel that, were there students that entered the program because of that? Do you feel that that was effective? Have you heard of any?
I don't have the statistics, and I'm not aware of anyone that was oh, I met you at the career fair and then I decided to apply to University of Manitoba. But we also gave them all the information, how to get into university, how that you need some science, high school science courses. And so we explained all that information to them as well. And I don't remember anyone ever saying that it was because of our trip. But
Right. But at least you offered the opportunity and to the students as well. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Monica, what are your thoughts around that?
Oh boy. Well, this is sort of what I do now, right? So we have a few ways that we've seen lots of engagement with. And I mean, both of them made really, really good points. But the one that I'm really going to settle on is having someone local to look to. And I know this sounds a little confusing, but I'll elaborate on that. When we have the kids come in, we have them come in to either, do a Q&A session, demonstrations, much like what Kathleen was talking about, to engage them and make it fun. But we also try to get local professionals to come in. And the reason why we've been going that route is because I know that we always don't want to stay with the familiar, but for that part of it, seeing the familiar, seeing the potential, seeing the fact that, oh, this person is Indigenous and they're a pilot. Oh, this person is Indigenous and they open their own small business. It gives them an opportunity to see that the world is not limited to that one road that goes in and out of the community. It shows them that there is so much more beyond that. And again, having the comfort of being able to connect with somebody, to ask the embarrassing questions, or to have that open discussion. And we're generally talking about young teens, children between the ages of 5 and 10. I mean, we do cover a very high demographic, and being comfortable helps with conversation. They're not the ones that are going out to the career fairs and being the go-getters. I mean, there are some, but a lot of them, they're afraid. And I think a lot of it has to do with how we project a lot of failure, especially within the media. You know, such a percentage of Indigenous people are unemployed, such a percentage of Indigenous people are unschooled. We see so much negativity that we don't realize that it impacts the choices that our youth make. So having local inspiration, having local mentors, having someone to help engage them in those early stages, to get them in the comfort zone where they can go outside and they can explore and they can start making those decisions, it really does, it becomes a game changer for us. I mean, I'm starting to see young girls and women now who were very, very shy coming to these programs, and they just blossomed, right? Not having to think that they had to do what we refer to as women's work, because there's still stipulation these days. I've had many people look at me and say, oh, you know, tradeswoman, you shouldn't be at that, right? The heavy lifting, you know, the planning, critical thinking, you know, like, isn't that uncomfortable to be in? And honestly, no, because I was very fortunate, even with my shortcomings in the beginning of my career. Along the way, I realized that the system that was designed for us was very broken and one-sided. So we had to look within our community and then branch out from there. So I truly believe if you want to engage people and get them comfortable enough that they want to explore it or continue to explore it on their own, we really need to look to our own people and our local companies and businesses as well. I mean, they do want to put in the effort. They do want to make the engagement. And seeing that representation is so powerful, and it's so good for our youth. So
Thank you. And it changing the narrative, I think you're spot on, is really important. And the three of you are just amazing in terms of changing that narrative and basically articulating a new narrative. And it speaks to building that confidence that Esther spoke of as well. So you're not coming from that position of defeat or uncertainty, that you're coming into your own confidence in your own self. So the last question that we had prepared before we open it up to other questions here from the folks who are listening and learning. And we'll start with you, Esther. And essentially, is there a call to action or a real strong thought that you have around what the engineering profession needs to do, and specifically what companies need to do to support and engage more women, and specifically Indigenous women within the workplace? So Esther, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I can definitely say that Sask Energy, having that Indigenous EIT role, that's the only reason I was able to break into engineering. I think without Sask Energy having created that, out of their whole EIT program, they created one specific job for an Indigenous EIT, and without having that, I probably wouldn't have I don't think I would have broken into engineering as well. When Sask Energy, they gave me really, really good training, like really good civil engineering training. They taught me, I went through just like the other EITs. I learned, we did the field work. I learned the field installation of the pipes, the pipeline code, design manuals, the pipeline design, like they taught me everything. And then so them giving me that opportunity and specifically only advertising it to Indigenous graduates, I don't know what I would have done without that. I was really struggling to find a job back in, that was in the year 2001. The economy wasn't super great back then. I don't know what I would have done without that opportunity. I was really struggling to find a job until that opportunity came up. So I think more jobs like an Indigenous EIT position, scholarships. I needed, like when I was in university, there were scholarships specifically and only for Indigenous students. I won, I think 1 or 2 scholarships that really helped me. I was really desperate for that those scholarships, to pay my rent and things like that. When I got them, I was very grateful. The scholarships helped. Yeah, and then just having some of the university programs, like the Engineering Access Program, really helped.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Esther. Monica, what are your thoughts here?
I've got some thoughts. Everybody buckle up because it's going to be a big one. So the first off, and it's just to touch base with what Esther said, financial support. That's a huge one. We realize that one of the difficulties facing many Indigenous youth right now is financial support. And I mean, we can all say that, yeah, everyone has equal opportunity. Unfortunately, no. Because of generational trauma, because of location, just because I won't get too much into that, but we are not on the same playing field. So by burdening these students with debt, for example, like myself, I came out of it with no degree, no feasible way of getting a job, and mountains of debt that I accumulated from what little education I could get. That's my story, but it's also the story of thousands of Indigenous students across the country. So offering these scholarship opportunities or offering these partnering opportunities with governments, Indigenous governments, it's huge. It's fundamental in how we break those systematic barriers and get our people into these institutions to learn, because that's what we want. We want to further these generations, not keep them back in the dark ages. And another thing, community engagement, right? You can't expect to create these programs and then have tons of applicants or tons of participation. First off, many companies are creating these policies and these resources without fully understanding the needs of the community or the needs of Indigenous students. So before, we want to go out and save the world, why not partner with an Indigenous organization, an Indigenous group, right? Hire Indigenous advisors to help create and monitor these programs, to implement these programs, because then you'll see success. Then you'll see the effectiveness of what you're doing, as opposed to sitting blindly, I call it, and assuming what people need, because that is the big issue here with us. And the third thing is adhere to your contracts. For myself, I live in Labrador. As of now, we have 500 registered Indigenous tradespeople. Companies are supposed to employ at least 25%. Many are 0 to 3%. Why? Well, apparently it's because we cause a liability. We are undertrained. Now, what does that mean for us? It means that there are barriers still there towards education. What can companies do? Well, why not pay for assisted training? Why not substitute college tuition? Why not pay for fall arrest or confined space or something that will help these people get into the workforce? And when they do get into the workforce, into the trades and professions that they are meant to be. For example, we had a wonderful single mother. She was from the Innu Nation. She was a heavy equipment operator, and they had her working as a janitor. Less pay, less hours, with a family to feed. As someone who advocates for Indigenous rights, especially with companies, this is not uncommon. So we really need to start having these conversations and making sure people are held accountable. Because if not, if we don't have these positions, if we don't have these talks, if we don't have someone, a heavyweight in the ring, making sure that companies adhere to their own contracts, we're going to see a lack of interest in STEM. We're going to see big failure rates. And we don't want that. We want our students to progress through the programs, and we want them to excel, because the knowledge they hold, the potential they hold, will be so beneficial to all of us. It's just making sure that somebody takes responsibility, and when they do, that they're held accountable for it. Welcome to my TED Talk.
Strong words from Monica. Well received, well received. And Katrin, any final thoughts before we see what our attendees are looking to hear from you?
Yeah, I was gonna sort of reiterate a little bit of what Esther and Monica and sort of tie a little bit of it together in the first part of my answers, just saying we need more programs like NGAP, like across Canada. I know that when I was going through it, it was the only one of its kind in Canada. More universities need to have programs modeled after that one, because I mean, Esther and I think half of our answers are around NGAP and how big of a difference they've made when it comes to financial support. They have their own bursaries, so companies are providing financial support through NGAP and dispersing that money that way. Another thing that made it super easy was that you're busy enough as a student, they would tell you, hey, they would do all the research of all the bursaries that are out there, and they would bring them to the forefront. They have them at the front desk. This one's big sign, this one's due end of the month, you know? So you didn't have to spend all this time searching for money. You knew what was coming up, what you had to do, they would help you. And then, you know, a lot of work is on the front end. And once you've created some of these letters, you can, in a sense, recycle them and tailor them to that specific bursary. But it went a long way in making that process way easier. And I think the second part of my question is there's been a couple comments here of people that are non-Indigenous. And so I'll maybe speak to that, and it'll sort of answer some of those questions at the same time, because it's sort of tied to this. So being a sponsor / ally, like I recognize those are both two different things. And to me, the sponsorship part is a huge deal, because as Indigenous people, as women, if you're first generation university student, you're then very likely a first generation professional. And so your network of like, oh, my dad knows someone that knows someone, or my dad is someone that knows someone, or I have a friend or a family friend or whatever it is, and having that network, it's much smaller or non-existent once you get into the workforce, or even as a student. That competitiveness of trying to get an engineering job is so high, and we're less likely to have those connections in the workforce to get engineering experience. So if, you know, whether it's creating positions like Esther said, of having like an Indigenous, like not vacancy, but a position, like that's great, but also going to NGAP, going to programs like that, and specifically recruiting from that pool of people. Like when you go and you speak directly to them, rather than like at an evening where all students are invited, it feels much more direct and more personal, that you truly want them to be part of their company. Hiring those people is going to make such a huge difference. I know that a lot of the opportunities that did come that way were a lot of the, I don't want to say a lot of the same, but it was a lot of big mining companies, a lot of companies that are kind of looking for students that are maybe willing to live in remote locations. And so maybe the thought is, if you come from a remote location, you're more comfortable living in a remote location. But then if you're looking for a student job, like within like the local area, that it wasn't as highly recruited. So that sponsorship, like that goes a huge way, where a long way in that you're mentioning someone's name when they're not in the room, so that they're being considered for a certain project. They're being considered, hey, have you thought of this person for that position? This position's coming up, and mentioning their names, because we're not less likely to have those allies. And so for non-Indigenous people, it's really important to recognize when you do have someone that's really great, and recognizing that they may not have someone that's thinking of them. It just is, it goes without saying. I'm trying to be brief so that we have time.
You're touching on a lot of the questions or the themes that are being asked. So thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm. The last thing I'll say is like, I was going to mention that Lisa Stepnick and Nicole Everett are doing incredible work at Engineers Geoscientists Manitoba. I know that there's a lot of great work being done by Engineers Canada, that there are resources, even just online, even if you don't make that connection with the actual people, they have so much stuff and they've done so much work in helping professionals, companies, whichever angle you're coming from, of what you can do to make the profession better and more diverse. And I think being able to reflect back on my experience from NGAP and then being in the workforce, I had a critical moment kind of like about 2 years into working of understanding the difference between fitting in and belonging. And I think if you can create a workplace that has a culture where everybody feels like they belong and they don't feel like they have to change who they are or kind of subdue themselves in a certain way or not be their true authentic selves in order to fit into the mold of what everybody else looks like, if you can create a place where people are just themselves, people are going to want to work for you, people are going to want to stay working for you, and they're going to have long careers, they're not going to leave, you're going to have better retention, and you're going to attract more people, more diverse workforce just naturally.
Absolutely, absolutely. I do like that a place where people feel like they belong and you don't have to change who you are when you cross the threshold to feel like you fit in. There's been some questions around the NGAP program, so thank you for mentioning that. Monica, very specifically, any plans or thoughts about going back into engineering, or are you taking your engineering mindset and focusing on your entrepreneurship, or if you don't mind answering that question?
No. As of right now, I thought about it, maybe in a couple of years down the road, I'll take a stab at it again. But being already through the process and now as an engagement officer and working with these companies and working with other Indigenous groups, like I said, it's a very broken system. And right now, I think in order to help the ones coming up and going through, they need all the manpower on the front line. So I'm going to devote myself to that, because again, if I had that level of support and commitment and a heavyweight in my corner, I feel like I would have been very, very successful. So it's what we do as knowledge holders is we try to help the next generation. And right now that's where my heart is too. And like I said, and if someone else comes along and does it better, then I'll take a stab at engineering again. But I want to make sure that that people are taken care of. And like I said, the companies are held accountable, because right now that's what we need. Yeah.
Absolutely, a culture of accountability. Thank you, Monica. Esther, there's been a few questions, if you have any, if you don't mind answering, around, what can professors do at the university level to make sure that they're creating that welcoming and sense of belonging within the classes for Indigenous students, and as well if they're looking at doing research, and really would like to include some Indigenous students in the research, like any thoughts around what we can do in that space?
Yeah, I'm not really a university scholar type. I finished my undergrad degree and left university and never went back. We had some professors at University of Manitoba that were really mentors to me. Not in the first year where there's the giant 300 student courses, like those professors I didn't even talk to. But as I got into engineering, the engineering professors, a lot of them became like personal mentors to me and went out of their way to encourage me and to help me. I remember there was one professor that went like way above and beyond. I don't know if he's still at University of Manitoba. His name was Chris Dick, and he did that to every Indigenous student. Like he would just go out above and beyond, like to do mentoring and help. And there was another professor, the transportation professor. Sorry, I can't remember his name. Katrine probably will remember. He also went out of his way. I'll remember by the end. Just to go out of their way to do mentoring and Chris Dick, offered to do my undergrad thesis work with me. So he went out of his way to offer to do, he even gave me thesis topics that he could work with me on. He went way above and beyond. He was my favorite professor, and definitely I always remember him.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Oh, it was Professor Clayton. His name was Professor Clayton, but I don't remember his first name now. Dr. Clayton. That's right.
And Randy has indicated that the other professor has happily retired. So I see we're at 4:01 Atlantic, which means we're at 3:01 Eastern time. Cassandra, are we looking to wrap up, or?
Yeah, I know that there's so many questions in the Q&A that you didn't get to, and we kind of knew this was going to happen, and so many amazing insights, but I do think we should probably wrap it up soon. I know everybody's super busy. It's been so great to have you all here today, and I know we have more programming coming for folks, so this will just keep going for the rest of the month, which is pretty exciting and wonderful. You have all been such an inspiration, and excuse me, I think there's a couple comments about how passionate and open you are, and how your honesty really is inspiring for people. So I really want to thank you for being brave today and for sharing with us your experiences, because it's not easy, and your path isn't always easy. And so just wanted to thank you and to congratulate you on all that you've accomplished. It's been a great discussion, and it really caps off our first day of our 30 by 30 virtual conference. So I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank Denise for moderating a fantastic panel. The big thank you for Esther, Katrine, and Monica for your insights. I'd also like to give a big heartfelt thank you to Elder Commanda for her opening prayer. Everything that she does and did today for us really has made a big impact and has helped us open this conversation in a good way. I also want to thank Jean for giving us the overview of 30 by 30 and for continuing to be such a fantastic and passionate champion and working with Engineers Canada. A big thank you to Charlene Theodore for being such a powerhouse and the best talk we could ever ask for a keynote today. I also like to thank all of our attendees for joining us, for being respectful in the chat and the Q&A. I think that is one of the biggest things that we can ask of people. People ask how to be allies. We're coming from a settler background or a non-Indigenous background. What can you do? Being respectful and listening, opening your ears and your heart to the experiences of others that live a different way. I think that's really the biggest thing that we can do, and to learn from each other. I hope that you'll all join us again in the coming weeks for day 2, 3, and 4 for the 30 by 30 virtual conference. If you haven't registered, feel free to pop in and register for the other sessions. Maybe we can just click to the next slide there. I see that's just click to the next slide, and everyone, please register for the next sessions. The registration link should be somewhere in the chat, but I can see it's probably getting buried. If you look up 30 by 30, you should be able to find our conference website. Like I said, we have lots of things coming up. Please join us again. Next Wednesday, we'll have a panel discussion about collecting data on diversity demographics with panelists from the engineering regulators. And after the panel discussion, each panelist will be running a workshop on the work that they're doing. So it'll be a bit more of this one-on-one interactive space. So we do really hope that you do join us, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks everyone, and all the best, and stay safe.